In recent years, there has been a large push to socialist and communist ideals in response to the issues that capitalism creates. Communism, however, is not a suitable response to social inequality, as is abundantly obvious by looking at history. While communism is a wonderful idea on paper, the facts of human nature make this idea impossible to bring to reality. Humans are overwhelmingly corruptible by power, and thus a long-term communist system is unfeasible. Many online so-called political pundits have seen incredible growth for putting forth their views on socialism, communism, and capitalism, but their views have major flaws. It is rather ironic for them to see such success by exploiting the capitalist systems of YouTube and Twitch in order to profit off the people that follow their beliefs, while spouting hatred for capitalism. The growth of these socialist/communist communities is led by a select few who manage to use their communities to benefit themselves while doing little for the people that prop them up. It is rather amusing that they manage to get away with such an exploitation of their communities, as socialists and communists are the ones that constantly cry about companies exploiting their labor. My personal take on communism as a whole is that those who support it lie at one of two extremes. There are those that benefit from spreading support for communism, propping up its ideas, and making vast profits by creating communities that buy into their ideas. Then on the other extreme, you have those who apparently lack the ability to think critically about communism and fail to understand the major issues it has, denying the truth of history, and refusing to accept the possibility that they might be upholding belief in a system that is far worse than capitalism. I once would have argued that the people that use the spreading of communist ideas for their own profit are smart, although the more I see, the more my opinion shifts to the idea that they use this idea simply because they are too lazy to create something of their own. Perhaps communism is simply an idea embraced by those who are too lazy to put effort into succeeding in life, aka the leaders most of the time, and those who aren't smart enough to innovate. Even if a nation were to establish a communist party that functioned well, it would be short-lived, as while the first people in power might have good intentions and plans to enact quote-unquote true communism, those who follow in their footsteps will inevitably ruin any dreams of a communist utopia. The fact of the matter is that without a proper system that includes proper counterweights, civilization just further deteriorates. Capitalism is a terrible system, but unfortunately it is the best system mankind has pulled out of its ass so far. By simply taking a look at history within the past 100 years shows just how quickly a communist system is corrupted by bad actors. The Russian Communist Revolution was ruined just as quickly as it had succeeded, thanks to Stalin making a play for power as soon as Lenin was out of the picture. Had it not been Stalin, someone else or some other group of people would have made a similar move to seize control of the country. It's simple human nature. When there is a chance for someone to gain power over another, or many others, typically that chance will be taken. This natural human ambition doesn't just ruin communism from the top of society, however, it also ruins communism at the bottom end of society. A system like communism that pushes all the power to a government and removes the independence of businesses leads to stagnation and mismanagement. Capitalism clearly has its flaws with this as well, with many businesses being able to lobby governments and push their own interests above those of the common publics. But society often tends to be able to correct such issues in their government over time. Looking at past communist examples, however, it is clear that such corruption does not get weeded out and corrected over time. Instead, the communist nation will simply stagnate until it no longer exists. In most cases, at least. One of the biggest issues with communism is that this stagnation is directly caused by the ideals of communism. Why innovate when you will not gain prosperity for your hard work? Why work tirelessly to improve your life and succeed when your nation will simply take the fruits of your labor and give it to a lazy neighbor? Humanity needs competition and ambitious people in order to grow. Giving everyone equal shares from society's output is the death of ambition and competition, and it is the birth of stagnation. Modern believers in communism have never had to suffer through the realities of a communist state and live in luxurious lives provided through capitalism. The classic argument is that, quote-unquote, real communism has never existed, and that the examples of Soviet Russia, Communist China, North Korea, and Cuba all don't count. The problem with this argument is that real communism is simply impossible due to humanity's natural flaws. If ambition and the desire to succeed was not allowed to exist, like in a communist society, humanity would be slowly crawling along at its historical pace of progress. Most modern followers of communism have either likely not read the Communist Manifesto itself, or simply have the desire to participate in a societal bloodletting. Karl Marx sought to birth communism through the destruction of his own society through violence, not peaceful protest. It is also rather idiotic to promote communism when, in all likelihood, should the political uprising come and pass, most of those who promote it would either be purged or simply live life in a much worse state than they currently do. Violent coups don't suddenly create a peaceful, stable government overnight. Years of purges follow in the wake of any coup, and communist purges in Russia were practically a constant under Stalin's rule. It is simply mind-blowing to me that so many buy into such a heavily flawed system, thinking that if they were the ones to bring communism to power, then it would work. Thinking that the historical failures of communism don't count because, quote-unquote, that's not real communism, is a weak cope, used by those who are unable to come to terms with the reality that mankind is far too flawed to establish such a utopia, and far too varied in its beliefs to accept such a societal structure either. The exception that would allow communism to work, at least somewhat, is if the state wasn't run by humans but an advanced AI instead. This clearly has major issues as well, though, as hardly anyone would want to have some AI in charge of their lives. This style of communism would be much harder to corrupt if no one was able to change the AI once it was in place, but again, it still wouldn't be incorruptible. And again, few people would want to live under robot overlords. And so, such a system would find great difficulties with keeping society peaceful and orderly. But even if such a system would work, someone would have to create an AI possible to perform such a task as evenly distributing everything within society and making sure to keep everyone in a balanced state. I know I personally would not be alright with letting some AI dictator dictate the flow of my life, but perhaps others might be fine with it. The one other possible way to make communism succeed in my eyes would be to alter humanity so that humans are not so corruptible. This I would also take major issues with, as it would effectively be altering humans, removing any semblance of independent goals or ambitions, and instead enslaving them to the needs of society. One should want to improve society without the need for being pressured into doing so by said society or that society's government. But it's clear that on average, the more power someone accumulates, the less interest they have in improving society unless it directly benefits them. Capitalism is certainly a flawed structure for humanity to be running off of, with great inequality and vast amounts of issues to correct. The problem is, no one has come up with a better solution for society, with communism being a terrible experiment that will fail any time it is attempted. Blending capitalism with elements of socialism, testing the mix until the balance is right, is likely the path society should take. I could do a whole video on just how weak of a system unrestrained capitalism is, but I'm lazy and have not acquired quite the same degree of hatred for it, and even at its worst, it still works far better than moronic communism.